Good afternoon. I'm Professor Pat Murphy, and I'd like to welcome you to the 12th Annual Theodore Hesburgh Award and Frank Cahill Lecture, both sponsored jointly by the Center for Ethics and Religious Values in Business and the Institute for Ethical Business Worldwide. My role is primarily a MC and keep things moving. And the order of events is going to be the Cahill Lecture, which is going to be given by the MBA students to my right, and then a little bit later we'll just transition into the Hesburgh Award that will be awarded to DuPont Corporation. So we'll start with the Cahill Lecture, and before I introduce the students, I'd like to introduce you to Frank Cahill, who the lecture is named in honor of. The Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture Series was established after his untimely death of cancer, age 59. Frank grew up in Syracuse, New York, and he always dreamed of attending Notre Dame. His graduation was the beginning of an abiding connection between the Cahill family and the university. The connection now includes his son, Mike, who we hope will be here a few minutes, CEO of Tower National in Fort Wayne, and Suan, who is a recent alum of the class of 2006. After earning his BS in Commerce, Frank enjoyed a very successful career as an executive in the trucking industry, where he retired as an officer for Roadway Express. Integrity, character, and ethics were cornerstones of Frank's life and career of his nearly 40 years in business. He experienced firsthand the challenges that commitment to ethical business practice can introduce in the pursuit of both personal and professional success. Frank recognized the real needs to introduce young professionals to some of the ethical considerations they'll face in the business world, and our panelists today will talk about a few of those. The Frank Cahill Business Ethics Lecture focuses on core principles of integrity and ethical behavior in the business environment and provides the Notre Dame community with a lasting reminder of Frank's exemplary qualities. So let me introduce our panelists quickly to you. Michelle Lanouette holds a bachelor's degree from Linfield College in Oregon, where she was the accounting student of the year, and she worked for KPMG for 5 years before coming back for her MBA. Michelle will share a few ethical dilemmas she has faced in her accounting work, and she will have to excuse herself because she has a 3 p.m. class that she's being given dispensation, I think is the right word, during Lent for the first few minutes of class. Then Brent Shavitz is our second presenter. His undergrad degree is from the University of Virginia. Worked for Motorola prior to his MBA, and according to his resume, he's a Six Sigma green belt. And Brent is graduating with a degree in marketing and accepting a position in Sprint. And Brent will discuss a few marketing issues with us. Suan Park is our third panelist. He received a BA from Notre Dame in MIS in Chinese in 2004 and is fluent in several other languages. He worked as a consultant for AMS and as planning analyst for Samsung. Suan will focus on both corporate and information systems issues. Daniel Diamond is their last panelist. His bachelor's degree is from Miami, Ohio in finance, and he's a marathon runner. He has held several positions at J.P. Morgan Chase and will focus on ethical issues in finance. So we'll start with each of the panelists giving a brief presentation, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. Michelle?
Thank you all for coming. I, as Professor Murphy said, worked at KPMG for 5 years, 4 of which I spent in the audit practice, and then 1 year working in the head office developing trainings for them. So the couple things that I in thinking about ethical dilemmas that I faced in my time there that I want to talk about, the first one has to do with expense accounts. My first day at KPMG, they give you your computer and they give you a $50,000 limit credit card that you can do whatever you want with it. You're supposed to use it for business expenses. You charge your expenses just like you do your time every 2 weeks. And when I first started, it was right after SOX took into effect, so we were working a lot, and our audit fees were 3 times what they are now. So we had a lot of room to use the expense accounts in charging the client. So, it's kind of one of those things at the end of the month you have to think about, is this really an expense that I would feel comfortable giving to the client and telling the client that? I'm charging this $200 steak dinner that was very good, or is it something that you don't, you should pay for yourself? And we had a lot of those decisions, and it's kind of interesting, like I said in the beginning, we charged everything to the client, and as the recession started taking forth, we really cut back on those expenses, and people started to pay more attention to what you were charging the client, because the client obviously did not have that money to be paying millions of dollars for their audit every year. So I think that became a good thing, but you really have to kind of take a step back and say, do you feel comfortable with this? If your boss were to ask you, or if the client were to get the detail of that expense report, can you honestly say that it was a business expense and it was a good decision to make? And I'll be honest, there were a couple times that I had to fly first class, or I had to go get the steak dinner for the client. But, at the end of the day, you really have to do what's best for you. So, really make sure you don't want to lose your job, or, kind of get a bad rap in the office for, a $200 dinner. You want to make the good decision, and you want to do the right thing, because I think now, especially that the recession has taken place, companies are paying more attention, so you do have that running the risk of, getting fired, or, getting kind of disciplined for little things like that. So just be careful of it is my advice. The other thing I was going to talk about is charging your time. It's kind of a double-edged sword, because your partner makes money for the time that you spend at the client. And so they want you to charge a lot of time to the client, and then your client has to pay for that time. So they want you to charge as little time as possible. So you kind of, are getting beat by both ends of the stick, trying to say, well, did you really work this much, or how long did that really take you? And you also kind of have the pressure for yourself that you want to say that you were a rock star and say it only took me, 10 hours to audit the revenue work, when it really took you, a lot longer, but you feel like that'll impress your bosses, or, do something. So one of the things that I really want to emphasize is you have to charge what you work, and you really want to do the right thing. And there's definitely times that you take a little bit longer, so you don't want to charge that time. But it was definitely it's interesting when you realize how much the company is making off of the time that you're charging, and it's kind of it's a thing that I battled. As Professor Murphy said, I do have to run to class. If anyone has any questions, I can't take place in the panel, but if any of the undergrads have questions about accounting, or, working at KPMG or auditing or anything, Professor Murphy has my contact information. I'm sorry, I have to leave. But I'm sure the panel will answer any of your questions. But thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. I think she just didn't want to hear her. I'm sorry? Sure. All right. Sorry. Thanks, Michelle. I'm pretty sure she left because she didn't want to hear her stories. But basically, like Professor Murphy said, Brent Shavitz, I worked at Sprint over the summer as a marketing intern in their 4G go-to-market team. I'd like to ask, how many people are familiar with 4G? Okay. That's pretty good. All right. For those who don't know, 4G, it's basically fourth generation. It's the next networks for wireless service, and it basically provides you that home-like internet experience on your mobile phone wherever you're at, which is great. And one of the cool things with Sprint over the summer was they were the only ones that have the 4G network at the time, and they were also launching the very first 4G phone, which is HTC Evo. So I really kind of stepped in at a great time to be there. One of the challenges, though, is because it was so new and they were the only ones to have it, was the fact that we had to educate our customers, and their sales staff had to know really well how to explain, what is 4G, how fast is it, what are the benefits you kind of receive for having the service. So one of the things that we did to really help it out was we created a playbook for all our sales staff, which basically had all our marketing messages, the things that we wanted to make sure that they were saying when they were selling to customers. An issue with this is that you're in the corporate office, you create an entire training book, you send it out, and you kind of cross your fingers and you hope they're saying the right things to the customers. But we really weren't validating it. And so my task for the summer was actually to do mystery shopping, which was really a pretty interesting thing. I remember when I was telling some of my friends that I'm going to spend 2 weeks mystery shopping all over the U.S., most of the girls were like, oh, you get to shop for 2 weeks and you get paid for it. That's awesome. But really, it's a lot more complex task than that. For one thing, you're shopping for the same exact thing 100 times, but you never purchase it. The other thing is that you can't just really walk in the store casually and shop. It's actually a lot more structured process where you need to have a script of kind of what you want to say. And basically, I had a list of 10 or 15 questions that I wanted the sales associates to answer for me. And you kind of got to almost play this role of improv where you're trying to make sure you guide the direction of the speech so that you get all the information you need. So I remember I was feeling really cocky for one of the first visits that I had, and it was in Kansas City at the Sprint store. And I walked in and going through the script, everything was going great. I was, hey, I need a new phone. I like to use the internet. I need, high speed, everything. I was a perfect 4G customer. I remember within the first few minutes, the lady asked me, she goes, so what company do you work for? And I kind of sat there and I was like, well, first, why is she asking that? And only to realize that they have corporate discounts. And second, if you want to do mystery shopping at a Sprint store, you do not want to tell them that you work in the corporate office. It doesn't work. The mystery is gone. It is just a complete fail. And if you do that, you really end up losing a lot of time, which is very valuable when you're trying to do so many visits in such a short time. So I remember when she asked me this, I was trying to think on my feet, what is the right answer? And I just remember saying, oh, well, actually, I don't work. I'm a student at the University of Notre Dame, which was true, but not totally truthful, I guess. I realized with that experience is when you're doing something like mystery shopping, you have to play this kind of script. You have to make up stories, and unfortunately, you have to make some set of lies to actually be able to get through this. And what I realized after that very first visit is that you have to kind of anticipate the kind of situations you'll get yourself in, as well as prepare yourself for it, and also really kind of know your limits. How far are you willing to make up stories to get the information you need? A little bit more of a serious issue came up when I was mystery shopping. I actually got a chance to also shop our competitors. So one of the things I was trying to find out is how do they sell their services and how do they talk about Sprint 4G and how do they talk it down. And I remember I went to one of the stores, and at this time, again, Sprint was the only one that had 4G service. I knew that they had the fastest network around. There was nothing better out there. And when I was talking with this competitor, they kept telling me like how there was the best service. And it kept going, and you're sitting there as a mystery shopper again. You don't want to reveal yourself, and you know this information. You just sit there and you kind of play dumb with it. But eventually, he pulled out a sheet of paper and he goes, "No, see, we are the fastest." And on this sheet of paper, it had all the competitors. It had AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, all these things, and it basically showed how fast their networks were. And on the line for Sprint, it had all this false information. It made no mention of Sprint 4G, which had been around for some time in that area. And and you're sitting there, and if you do competitive intelligence or you ever get a chance to do it, you're always looking for a smoking gun. You want to find something that is just blatantly wrong, and you want to be able to bring it back to your boss and go, look, this is what our competition's doing, and we need to take action. And I thought I had it. The more I looked at the document that this guy handed me, I realized at the very bottom it said, confidential proprietary information. It was for internal use only. I realized I actually had a sheet of their playbook, their sales playbook. And so in my possession, I had a competitor's confidential information, which I obtained legally. So what do you do? At the time, I wasn't really sure what to do. I mean, I really wanted to get a chance to get this, show this to the boss that I was doing great stuff. But at the same time, this is information that I should have never seen, customers should have never seen. It just kind of fell into my lap. I remember one of my buddies at Sprint, another guy who'd done competitive intelligence, Jeff, I knew I can trust him, and in this situation I needed his help. And I sent him the document knowing that he wouldn't send it along unless we got a chance to discuss it. And just being able to talk the issue out loud and kind of have someone to kind of verify what you really want to do, we realized that we took a very strict approach to it. This is confidential information. We shouldn't have had it. The issue kind of ended there. The whole mystery shopping experience is really kind of an interesting thing. It has ethical issues on a really simple basis and things that can get really dicey. But one of the things that the two things that I think I really come out of is, you're going to run into ethical issues at some point. It's going to happen to everyone here. It's best that you anticipate that it'll happen. Think about what you would do in those situations so that when they do occur that you're prepared. And second is really, in some of the more dicey situations, you can always look out to your support network, whether it be your coworkers, your friends, your family. And by consulting with them and being able to talk some of the issues out loud, you get a better chance to make better decisions. So, thank you.
Good job, Dan. Hi. My name is Suan. I'm a first-year MBA student. I graduated from University of Notre Dame in 2004. I worked for about 6 years, and I came back to school. I believe that, although I'm a graduate here, I believe I'm a product of Notre Dame. I think the school really emphasizes in the core concept of ethics, about spirituality. That's why I took that within me when I graduated, and I felt that I was immune. I felt that I was ready to tackle on any type of ethical challenges upon graduation. That's what I thought. And matter of fact, when I was an undergrad student here, I don't know if they still do this here, but they gather all the rising sophomore business majors in this same auditorium. And there was about 9 professors, and then they gave us a mock pep rally pretty much. They yelled at us. They told us, you guys are Notre Dame students. You are ND. And they just yelled at us for a good 8 hours. But because of that pep talk, something went in my heart, and I really thought I was a Notre Dame student at the same time. Because of the pep talk, maybe, I knew exactly what to say when, problems like this would arise in the future. But that wasn't the case. My major was MIS, Management Information System. I worked at the IT consulting field. As soon as I started working, I think my second week of work, my manager came up to me with the documentation, and he wanted me to alter the data on the documentation. And you guys want to know what my response was? Because I was an ND student. I looked at my boss, I smiled, and I simply told him, I'm sorry, I can't do this because I'm a Notre Dame student. The guy yelled at me. He hated me, he yelled at me, he looked down on me, but I took so much. It was embarrassing at the same time. Maybe I was naive at that time. I was a 22-year-old, young Korean American ready to change the world. That's what I thought. But I realized that was a terrible answer. And I went back to my desk. I thought about my answer again and how to deal with this because I was faced with an ethical dilemma. So what I decided to do was, whenever there's an ethical dilemma, there's always 2 answers. You could take the shortcut and do whatever he or she asks you to do, your boss. But you could always take the long way and then, approach the solution in the right manner. But it might take some more time. It might be more tedious. But that's the personal value that I had. So I decided to do that. I think working on IT consulting was the easy part. When I moved my job to Samsung, that's when craziness happened. I'm sure that in 2008, you guys read, a lot of Samsung executives were called in by the prosecutor in South Korea. So I witnessed that. I went through that. But what I do want to share is, I think working at a business setting, and because we will be facing more ethical dilemmas in a bigger scale, and it will happen, but I think working at a corporation is bigger than that. There will be ethical dilemmas, but the way I started approaching this was the spiritual aspect. We are Notre Dame students, right? And we focus in the spiritual side. And the way I approached this was, people are always going to be judging us, and people are always going to be looking at every action and every decision we make. And because we are ND students, because we have the ethics embedded in us, but because it's so difficult, I started thinking more into the spiritual aspect. I wanted to say the right things. I wanted to do the right things. And I think consistently, once the employers and your superiors or managers start seeing that in you, they start respecting that. As a matter of fact, people start questioning you. Hey, listen, where did you get these sets of personal values? Why are you always smiling? Or why are you always, why is your lifestyle a certain way? And I think in terms of spiritual aspect, that's how we could bring out, when the scripture tells us to be the salt and light in this world, it really made sense for me working at a business setting. Business setting is challenging. It's going to be tough. But that's why the scripture makes sense when he calls us to be salt and light. Always think about our actions, what we're going to say at work. And let's try to reflect Christ in us at workplace. Go Irish or something. All right.
Well, I want to thank both you guys for sharing your stories so far. As I was introduced, my name is Dan Diamond. I spent 3 years working at JP Morgan. I started in the summer of 2007 when the Dow was at 14,000. When I left, the Dow was about 9,000. I promise it wasn't my fault. So I'm here today to share a couple stories that I had while working at JP Morgan. The first of which, I worked on a corporate reporting team that dealt a lot with revenue recognition, with cost issues. And really, some of it's to Brent's point earlier, is it really showed me the importance of finding a corporate mentor. And you're going to be faced with all different kinds of questions and all different kinds of dilemmas when you're working through the corporate world. And a lot of it, I think, because of our age in a corporate setting, there will be times where people may try to take advantage of your inexperience, may try to take advantage of the fact that you haven't been around very long to make you do things that maybe you feel uncomfortable about. And that's why I really encourage each and every one of you early on to find someone who's a little bit older, and maybe they're another Notre Dame grad and have the same kind of values that Suan was talking about, but find someone you can connect with, so that if you're placed in those type of situations, where if you're not sure whether or not it truly is something that you're comfortable with, that you have that sounding board to go to. I know for me, at JP Morgan, I benefited greatly from my first boss. And yes, he was a Notre Dame grad as well, class of '82. And outside of the fact that I always knew where I could talk football with somebody, I always knew that if ever somebody asked me to do something that I was unsure about, that we could close the door, have a conversation, and I knew it would never get any further than that, and I knew that I could really trust his judgment and his experience. So I think really early on, when you're in that corporate setting, identify people who can be a benefit to you both personally and professionally. Because we learned so much here at Notre Dame, we could never remember it all. I guess I probably shouldn't tell the professors that. We probably never can remember everything that we learn here. But those interpersonal skills that we pick up and that we learn, and the ability to make those connections within the workplace, are really invaluable. I mean, they really are incredibly important to what we do. I see the other thing that I want to talk about is sort of, I say more black and white, at least it was for me, is when in my job, I worked a lot with HR roles. And clearly in 2008, JP Morgan was laying off a lot of people. It was a really difficult time for the financial services industry, as most of you know. And some of the issues that I had to deal with was that I had access to the lists of people who were going to be laid off. A lot of it had to deal with my budgeting and forecasting jobs. I worked very closely with the business leads, and so a lot of times I would see lists months in advance of my friends and my colleagues who weren't going to have jobs in a couple months. And a lot of times that puts you in a really, really difficult position, because these are people who you might go have a soft drink with after work, or come on, this is still Notre Dame, right? Or, go have a meal and do those sorts of things. And you're trying to balance that personal relationship with that professional sort of duty that you have to your firm. And so we all struggled with it within my group, is how do you handle that? How do you sort of keep those personal relationships while trying to stress, especially after the fact? Because I can tell you there were a few times where I had people who I viewed as friends who came up to me afterwards and asked, did you know this? Did you know I wasn't going to be here, or that I was going to get laid off? And honestly, the answer was yes. I did know. And there's a couple people that there were probably personal relationships that were harmed because they thought that I had betrayed them. But I think on some level, you have to know that you're doing the right thing, that you're doing your job. And in the end, the ethical decision is one that you have a duty and you have a job to do, and your job is always, sometimes to question if you don't feel comfortable doing something, but it's also to know that you've been tasked with a job to do, and in the end, sometimes just doing that job may not feel like the right thing, but it is the right thing to do. And I really encourage you, a lot of it's just trying to feel comfortable in that sort of situation and understanding that you're still doing the right thing. It may not feel like it sometimes, but you are doing the right thing. So, I really thank you all for coming today. I'm sorry that I had to, bring us down from Suhan's very smiley performance. But I think at this point we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. Yes. We have time for a few questions. If the questioners, you don't have to come up to the front. If you could just stand up and say your question loudly so panelists can hear it. So I say to my own students, it can't be that clear, even though these guys were very clear.
It's okay.
Dan.
did it ever become a point where you said, well, maybe this job's not for me? And is that okay? Because you seem you're very adamant about doing the right thing. This is a job that I've been entrusted to do. You know, is it okay to say, well, maybe this job's not for me, maybe I need to do a different line of work or figure out something else to make me feel better?
I think sometimes, I'm going to tell you, there were definitely times when I went home and said, oh my gosh, am I in a job where all I do is fire people? And that's definitely not a line of work, to be honest with you, that I wanted to be in. So some of it goes back to, for me, going to the mentor that I had and saying, look, Joe, this makes me feel terrible. You know, this is not a job that I really love right now. And either A, can I do something else, or at least talk to me about what I should be learning from these experiences. Some of this is going to sound maybe a little odd, but I learned so much from those couple of years that I know in any sort of management situation in the future that not a lot of 24 and 25 and 26-year-olds have to deal with being able to fire someone and have to deal with being able to tell somebody that their job's no longer there. So that definitely didn't, to your point, there were days in which I would go home and go, maybe this isn't the job for me. Maybe this is, and it was all throughout the financial services industry during the past few years. So I know I don't have probably a unique perspective on that. But it's definitely, you have to wonder, is it going to get better? Is the job going to change? Or is this something I want to continue to do? So for me, having that mentor was key for him to say, you know what, this is cyclical, this is short term, we do need to do this now, but this isn't going to be your role for the rest of your life. So that aided me along.
Another question? Yes.
When you were wrestling with that issue, with the sales piece, the piece of information that fell into your lap, what was the other side of that? I mean, you must have had emotions and trying to maybe almost in a journalistic sense, like uncover this big, lie that the competitor was.
I've condensed the story, and there's a lot more to it when you think about it. I was reflecting on the story just recently, trying to think about it. You do have this information you're not supposed to have, but is it always, the situation where you just don't do anything with it? And I think there's a lot more steps to it than that. So, a lot of it was, the discussion was not only, should we have this information, but we also kind of thought about, what is the impact? Is this something that's, a widespread problem? Is it something where the competitor is, clearly making false claims across a broad spectrum, or is this more of an isolated event? When I thought about that, if there was something that became a lot more broad and more, we noticed it about a bunch of the mystery shopping, I would use that kind of information. But it was really hard to use this one piece of information, knowing, full well we shouldn't have it. Now, again, I really don't know what the right answer is when you might get some sort of information that is clearly illegal or something that's very detrimental, something that's extremely harming your business. I don't know what you do with that. But for this situation alone, it ended up, severity was kind of an important part of it, and realizing that, again, it was an isolated incident, and I'd like to hope that it wasn't, again, severely detrimental to the business.
Thank you. One more question? Yes. Would you stand up so we can hear you better?
In regards to what you said about living out spiritual convictions, have you ever experienced hostility in the corporate environment when you have a viewpoint that might be strictly religious, or do you just stick to expressing Christian beliefs in terms of ethics and ethical values?
Yeah, the way that I approached it was, I always think of the quote by St. Francis. He says, "Preach the gospel at all times, but if necessary, use words." That's the motto. And at the same time, when you're working at work, people can tell your actions, because if it's consistent, and if there's some kind of positive attitude whenever a crisis hit, I think people can start sensing that. And here in corporate America, especially in the United States, I think it's illegal to start talking about religion or try to evangelize people, right? Right, absolutely. Is it? Okay. Well, I try not to break that rule, because I wasn't the first one who initiated it, but, coworkers will come after and then just start talking about, hey, what do you do on weekends, or what do you like to do, things like that. And whenever I got the opportunity, I wouldn't keep it shut. I wanted to express it, and at the same time, because they got the interest first, I wanted to, tell them what it was all about. And through that, I was, able to share my faith at the same time, try to show them that, at work, it's totally possible to live out the spiritual, the lifestyle, right? And that's what I kind of tried, and still struggling with that, but it's been fun and it's challenging. Thank you.
Well, thanks to our panelists, including Michelle, who had to go to class, but I think you saw some very thoughtful and interesting case examples, and each of the panelists had a little different way of approaching them, which was part of our rationale. And please join me in giving a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you, guys. You're off duty now. We're now moving to the Hesburgh Award presentation, and I guess I have to start with a bit of not too bad news, but for most of us involved in this program, a little bit of bad news. Father Hesburgh had to have minor surgery this morning and therefore can't be with us this afternoon, but we kind of anticipated that, and we have a short video just in a couple minutes to share with you. But before we kind of launch into the Hesburgh Award, the person whose idea it was to have this award is my colleague, Father Ollie Williams, who will share with us a little bit of the background, and then Charles Attiri, who nominated DuPont for the award, will come up after that. Ollie?
Thank you, Pat. Several years ago, the ethics faculty decided that we ought to have an award each year to a distinguished business leader who not only demonstrated unusual competence in the business field, but also great attention to ethical issues, sustainability issues, corporate citizenship issues. The first question was, what should be the name of that award? And we kind of brainstormed a while. One idea, of course, was to name it after a generous benefactor. And as you know, at Notre Dame, we have many of those, and some of the future benefactors, no doubt, are sitting right out here. But we played around with various names, and different people who have been very good to the business school. And one of my colleagues suggested, why not name the award after Father Theodore Hesburgh? I felt I had a conflict of interest since he's been a good friend and colleague in many years. So I didn't say much, but that was finally the consensus position. Why did we choose to name it after Father Theodore Hesburgh? Well, Ted was president here for 35 years, and I always only half jokingly tell him that he was the greatest entrepreneur who ever walked on this campus. When he took over in 1953, the annual budget was $9.5 million. Today, it's over $1 billion. When he took over in 1953, there was hardly any endowment. Today, it's $5.5 billion, and over 70% of the students get some sort of scholarship assistance. And it's largely the trajectory that Father Ted put us on in his 35 years as president. That's when Notre Dame began to be known for something other than a football school. He always likes to tell his story. His first press conference, some reporter threw a football at him, to him. He said, I'm here to change that. Not to do away with football, certainly, but to have Notre Dame known for academic prowess and for distinguished scholars and students. Certainly he has been successful. As you may know, he's had 15 presidential appointments. He has over 150 honorary degrees, and the list goes on and on. But in any event, I'm honored here to tell you that it's the Father Theodore M. Hesburgh Award, and we have a very distinguished business leader to get that award this afternoon.
As Charles will share with you in a few minutes, one of the class assignments in my marketing ethics course in the fall semester is to have students nominate corporations for the Hesburgh Award. And Charles Zatiri, who's a native of Lagos, Nigeria, but has spent a lot of time in this country. He's an undergrad from the University of Illinois and working on his MBA here. He wrote a very fine paper and a very convincing paper on nominating DuPont for this award. So we'll have Charles provide his rationale. Charles?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you for joining us today in celebrating this year's Hesburgh Awards. First, I'd like us to take a few moments to remember the many victims of the Japan earthquake, as well as those who continue to suffer in the crisis-ridden Middle East. We pray for the quick healing and recovery from these disasters. As a graduating MBA, I'd like to think that I'll be leaving here hopefully a little bit smarter, and also more appreciative of the many business challenges that transcend just stock prices and the bottom line. But I know I'll be leaving with a greater appreciation of very important values that Notre Dame espouses. Values that I'm confident would help me not only become successful in whatever I choose to do, but also help me make a positive impact in the lives of my fellow brothers and sisters. When I was first given the assignment to nominate an organization worthy of the Hesburgh Award, I must confess I was a little bit overwhelmed. How do I select one company that best exemplifies the basic values personified by Father Hesburgh over the years? As I carried out the required research and followed the recommended guidelines, the task suddenly became easy. For over 200 years, DuPont has lived core values based strongly on safety and health, environmental stewardship, respect of employees, as well as ethical behavior. These values have helped successfully guide the firm as it maps out its various operating strategies. Today, DuPont is not only one of America's most successful corporations, it is also a recognized leader in the areas of ethics and sustainability practices. DuPont leads by adopting the philosophy that it is not enough to merely meet government regulations, and has consistently maintained a higher standard that goes far and beyond these minimums. DuPont continues to raise the bar by setting higher goals that put its sustainability efforts and accomplishments far above those of other firms. DuPont has clearly defined goals that follow from its core values. These goals are categorized as its market-facing, footprint, and energy goals. For example, under its market-facing goals, DuPont aims to introduce 1,000 new products and services that make people safer. It also aims to generate at least $2 billion in revenues from products that reduce greenhouse emissions or create energy efficiency. Under its footprint goals, DuPont aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emission by 72%, as well as achieve a 92% reduction in its air carcinogen emissions. Under its energy goals, DuPont aims to generate 10% of its energy from renewable sources, as well as hold its overall energy usage to its 1990 levels. It aims to achieve all of these goals by the year 2015 and clearly records its progress so far in its annual Sustainability Progress Report. DuPont is a strong believer in the notion that healthy businesses need healthy communities to thrive. Therefore, it strives to support various community-based initiatives through financial donations and also through the direct active participation of its employees. Support is generally given to specific programs or non-profit organizations that attempt to make the communities where it operates sustainable. As far as the community goes, sustainability is not the only focus of DuPont. The company actively supports community programs that aim to address social progress and economic success in addition to its environmental excellence. Such programs include those that support education, culture and arts, human and health services, and other community and civic activities. For example, DuPont was the first corporation to award scholarships and fellowships to chemists at 48 colleges and universities in the United States. Strong corporate governance practices have also played a major role in DuPont's success over the years. It enforces a code of conduct and ethics for its board of directors, senior management, as well as its employees. The firm operates an employee ethics and conduct hotline to help its employees report ethical and conduct violations in confidence. It places high ethical expectations on its senior management and board of directors, which is filtered through the entire organization over the years. For the second year running, Corporate Responsibility magazine has included DuPont in its top 100 best corporate citizens list. So we are honored today to have the DuPont CEO, Ellen Coleman, here with us today. 23 years ago, she started her illustrious career with the firm as a marketing manager. She went on to serve as the director of several of DuPont's business units, including white pigments and mineral products, and became the vice president of this unit in 1995. Since then, she has led two of the firm's high-growth businesses, DuPont Safety Resources in 1998 and Bio-Based Materials in 1999. She was named the group vice president, DuPont Safety and Protection in 2002, and in 2006, she assumed the role as executive vice president with responsibility over 3 business platforms and several functions, including marketing and sales. In 2008, she was tapped to lead the company's focus on growth in emerging international markets. Ellen became the CEO of DuPont in 2009 and became the chair of the board a year later. Since she assumed the role as CEO, she has championed the market-driven science approach to drive innovation across the firm's business units. Her leadership approach has seen her move the decision-making process of the firm closer to the customers, thereby facilitating higher-level collaboration to better serve the exact needs of its customers worldwide while operating the DuPont long-standing core values. So please join me today in congratulating DuPont for being this year's recipient of the Hesburgh Award for exemplary ethical, environmental, social, and governance practices. Thank you.
And now we'll have the short video, since Father Ted usually has a few remarks about this time in the program.
I'm delighted to welcome Ellen Coleman, the CEO of a great corporation who has for years, everybody knows the name DuPont, carried on a system and a tradition of ethical commitment in all of the work they do. Ms. Coleman, of course, and heading up such a corporation, is the epitome of all that we are trying to honor and, of course, inculcate in our students at Notre Dame. A sense of responsibility, a sense of the common good, a sense of giving, so that corporations do not just inhabit the world of business, but they enrich it with their ethics, with their generosity, and with their high standards that set a mark for business all around the world. It's a happy day, I know, for Ollie Williams and his colleagues to be here for this award, and I am sorry that I can't be here, but I'm here at least in this text, and I do want to give my personal congratulations and best wishes to Ms. Coleman and to her corporation and to all that they stand for, which we at Notre Dame try to buttress in all of our students, to follow the example of social responsibility and to put ethics over profits when we make our decisions. Again, Ms. Coleman, my heartiest congratulations, my best wishes, and I do congratulate you on a wonderful company that has 2 centuries of tradition in doing what is good and proper for the business community in America and throughout the world. We're proud of you, and we're happy to honor you today in this way. all the best. Thank you.
We're going to take a couple of pictures, Charles. The absent-minded professor forgot the important piece of hardware. As Charles said, we're very honored, Ellen, that you took your time to be with us today and very much look forward to your remarks.
You know, he's a great guy, huh? I'm sorry I missed him. It is a real honor to be here today. Charles, I will tell you, great research. I read his nomination and I was impressed. And all the information's out there on the company. We put most of it out there on our website. But I think he did a great job of integrating the various aspects of what our company stands for. And it didn't all happen at once. It happened over 208 years. And so this company is very much a journey, and it's really a great honor to be selected as the recipient of the 2011 Hesburgh Award, and humbled to be among the people that have received it. It's not easy. I think as the students talked about in the Cahill lecture series here a little earlier, and I got to hear at least 2.5 of them. But every day in business, you're asked to make decisions and you're asked to place judgments upon things. And it is your experience and it is your values that you bring to bear on that. And any company is made up of a series of individuals who bring their own values to it. And we as a company can help that. We can train people, we can talk to them, we can communicate. But we are only as strong as our weakest employee in that endeavor. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our history, and our history is rooted in our core values. We have 4 core values, so they're really easy to remember. It is about safety and the environment. You can't start a company making black powder and not be about safety. It is about the environment. It is about we have to do it in a way that's very sustainable. It is about highest ethical standards, and it's about respect for people. Because again, as a science company, we're only as good as our people who can work together that can create real innovation and connect it to the marketplace in new and unique ways. But we did have a founder. His name was Irénée DuPont, and he was a French immigrant. Now, although the family is staunchly Protestant today, I will tell you that Irénée and his brother were both confirmed in the Catholic Church in Paris before they emigrated into the United States. He was an aristocrat. He was an educated man of science, and he was a very principled person. He put his family, they got in a little bit of problem with the French back then. It was a tumultuous time in Paris. They were hanging people right and left if they weren't beheading them. And it was the middle of the revolution, and he put his family on a boat and spent 90 days weathering the Atlantic storms. And they finally landed on the coast of Rhode Island in 1800. Now, the family was desperate and hungry, and it was a very rough crossing. And they found an empty house, and there was food in that house. And they stayed in that house for a very short period of time. They took advantage of the food, but they left a gold coin to compensate whosever house it was for the sustenance that they gained from it. And from there, they made off to New York, and finally, in 1802, ended up on the banks of the Brandywine River in Wilmington, Delaware. Now, creating a business enterprise in the early 19th century was not an easy feat, especially when it was manufacturing gunpowder. Now, they were very aware of the hazards involved, and EI went to great lengths to create a safe and respectful work environment for his employees and to try to be as socially responsible as he could in that time frame with the science that was available. So most of the mills back then that made gunpowder in Europe were made in a huge single building. Well, EI decided that he was going to use smaller buildings, 3 sides stone, 1 side brick, wood, and the wood side faced the river. So that if there was an explosion, it was a single mill. The fire would go out into the river. and any employees who happen to be in the building, but it would protect the rest of the employees on the site and the like. And it was actually very grimly sensible at the time. No one was allowed to have anything metal on them. No, you think about cell phones now and banning them. They weren't even allowed to have a nail in your pocket because something that could cause a spark could create an explosion. So they had a system of training and retaining employees at the company because it was through experience that their employees got very good at doing what they did. He was one of the first to put in place in a U.S. company the payment for overtime and differential payment for night work. He implemented a pension system and a savings plan for his employees, and he was one of the first industrials to hire a physician to attend to the workers that were injured on the job. Actually, very practical given where the mills were versus where the city of Wilmington was. It's a couple of miles, but back then that was a long time. His daughters helped forge a community at the mills by teaching the 3 R's to the workers' children. Now, that kind of really freaked out my 3 kids when I first took them into the schoolhouse on the grounds of Hagley Museum, where the children were taught reading, writing, and arithmetic, and it was called Sunday school. They confused it with the religious education they were getting. But quite frankly, if the kids were above a certain age, they were working in some way in the house or on the grounds, and they went to school on Sundays to learn reading, writing, and arithmetic. We obviously have come a long way since 1800s. But, so it was a time when the commitment to safety, a commitment to employees was very easily seen by the employees because he built his house right above the mills. So if there was a major explosion, his house was in harm's way. His family was in harm's way. And he did that to show his commitment that they were all in it together, that he was not totally different than the workers. So because of his personal convictions, our core values were set very early in our company history and have been steadfast ever since. Now, today, DuPont adheres to the 4 core values I talked about: safety, environmental stewardship, highest ethical behavior, and respect for people. And these items we consider non-negotiable, and we consider them to be central in everything we do as a company. And I'm proud to say that they have stood the test of time and very much align very clearly with the recent standards in the UN Global Compact, which we were one of the first companies to endorse. At DuPont, we start every meeting with a core value contact. It might be a tip, an observation, or very practical guidance related to one of our core values. Many times they're just simple reminders of common courtesy, simple reminders of simple safety techniques that we like to use to keep our employees safe. And, that collective and that unified action that we take, I think, really helps reinforce our core values. There's not a question in any one of our employees' minds what those 4 core values are, and that we are very serious about our focus on them. So I just want to give a couple of examples of a couple of the ways that we live our core values and our commitment to social and environmental responsibility, and very practically corporate governance in today's day and age. In terms of ethics, we have a code of conduct, many companies do, that all 60,000 of our employees in 90 countries throughout the world are responsible for living up to. The ethics hotline that Charles mentioned in his talk is available around the clock, and employees know it is their duty to report suspicious behavior. And as a reminder that we have that obligation, every year we have online training for 100% of our employees that talks to our commitments around ethics, our commitments around people, and around our core values. In terms of sustainability, our goal was to create growth based on the development of sustainable solutions. So that might sound a little funny coming from a company who made black powder and who pioneered modern chemistry and who did a lot of things maybe in the over 2 centuries we've been working on that by today's standards would not be considered sustainable. But very clearly as we were coming through the 70s and the 80s, what we realized is to be around in 300 years, we would have to enact another transformation from basically employing all of science to be able to keep improving lives, improving innovation, and connecting it to the marketplace, but in much more sustainable ways. So when it comes to sustainability, we continue to measure our footprint and to reduce it. We continue to tackle new challenges in the marketplace. Charles mentioned the fact that we have a goal to introduce 1,000 new products that help people be safer. Well, many people question that, but when you're in a company that pioneered Kevlar, which is the ballistic resistant, or Nomex, which is fire-resistant materials, it comes naturally to us. We do make a lot of products that keep people safe, and we wanted to make sure that we were very focused on doing that. We invest our research and development dollars in these sustainable products that not only protect people but the environment, and overall not only help us meet our own goals but help our customers meet theirs as well. So back in 2008, we developed the 2015 sustainability goals. We had met a lot of our 2000 sustainability goals before 2010, so 2 years early we needed to up our game. And we decided to go beyond our traditional footprint and include the market-facing goals, include innovation, include things we're doing for our customers. And we're proud of the progress that we've made has gone beyond reducing greenhouse gas emissions and energy and water usage and decreasing carcinogens and air pollutants, but back into that marketplace, back into helping our customers as well. You know, customers today are asking more and more for renewably sourced products. And even through the global financial crisis, that did not backtrack. That people want to be more sustainable. They want to understand the impact of the products that they're buying. And that really helped us continue with our commitment to double our revenues from products based on non-renewable, non-depletable raw materials. And at $7.4 billion in revenue from products that are based on non-depletable raw materials, we're on track to reach our $8 billion goal. We also set a goal to grow our revenues by $2 billion from products that increase energy efficiency or reduce greenhouse gas emissions of our customers. And so this past year, we generated qualified revenues of over $731 million and avoided almost 500,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions by those products. So we also like to recognize our employees' sustainability efforts, and we created Sustainable Growth Awards. And each year we recognize employees across the company who make a difference either for the company or in their community in which they operate. And recent accomplishments there include the creation of next-generation refrigerants that have low global warming potential. So they are going to replace over the next few years the refrigerants that are having issues in the atmosphere. We have the development of a new line of renewably sourced plastics that can replace plastics that come from fossil fuels. And people like Toyota, people in electronics, your covers for your phones and your computers, are very interested in going more renewable in the plastics that we use and we see every day. And the first large-scale commercial application is going to be for that plastic is actually going to be the breathable moisture barrier film that's used in carpet. So carpet will be more renewably sourced in the future. So for winning this prize, this Sustainable Growth Award, each of these groups or individuals get to donate money that we give them to the community or to the organization of their choice to help in their own local communities and furthering their own efforts. In terms of social responsibility, our employees around the globe are committed to giving back into those communities. We have an annual volunteer recognition awards to recognize their civic mindedness and their efforts to help in their communities. And this goes from remote villages in China, where we're repainting schools with paint that is safer to the environment, and providing health awareness workshops to low-income students in Pakistan. Our employees are making a difference around the world. I spent a lot of time in a TiO2 plant in a place called New Johnsonville, Tennessee. And one of our engineers there, when he saw the videos from the tsunami, is gathering shoes and has done a shoe drive and has shipped a container of shoes to our people in Japan to get to the tsunami and earthquake ravaged area. Now, Kermit coal, knows nothing, has never been far outside of Tennessee. But he felt that he and his community had the resources to help, and he knows that we have lots of employees in Japan, and he just wanted to help. And it's people like that every day that make DuPont who we are. You know, in terms of governance, I am the chair of the board and the CEO, and I take that very seriously. I will tell you the most humbling day I had in my career is the day they asked me to lead this company. It is very interesting when they ask you to lead a 208-year-old company, and that the actions and the decisions that the team and I will make in the up to a decade that I will be running this company are not going to necessarily impact today as much as they're going to impact a generation from now, the science that's being deployed. And that's a burden, and that is something that we take very seriously, that we can help with a lot of the problems that are going on with the world. And I say that because many times the work we do does further resolving issues in the world. We're a large agricultural company. We have seeds and crop protection chemicals. We're lowering the toxicity of the crop protection chemicals. We're increasing the yield of seeds. With the population of the world passing 7 billion this year and going to 9 billion by 2050, and the amount of arable land you have to grow is going to be about the same during that period of time, we're going to have to get a lot more out of the land we have. And that science can help with that, and DuPont can be part of that solution. You look about that same population and the impacts it's going to have on energy. Because all these people in the world want energy. They want transportation. They want communication. They want to live in a place where they feel safe and they have heat and maybe even air conditioning. And to do that, it's going to mean that we're going to need more and different kinds of sources of energy. And whether it's solar or whether it's wind or whether it's biofuels from cellulose, to help extend what we have today, there's a tremendous amount that science can do in order to affect a much different energy future. And when you think about protecting people and the environment, it is the same way. We have a survivors club for police officers, and there's a group of heads of police departments around the country that are the decision body about whether the vest actually saved the officer or not. And we have well over 1,000 officers who have been verified by their police departments to be alive today because of the Kevlar vest they were wearing. And it's actually a very humbling thing to go to those ceremonies and to talk to the kids and the parents and the spouses of these officers. And that's something DuPont can continue to do much more with as the 7 billion to 9 billion people are going to occupy the same amount of space that we do today. So I had a reporter once ask me, how do you make sure sustainability isn't just window dressing? It's just not there to make you feel good or maybe have you get a little higher score on a sustainability index. And I, had to think about that because I do think that's a question you have to answer. But I knew after 22 years in this company that sustainability at DuPont is not a program. It's not something that can be isolated or cordoned off for special treatment. And it's not an overlay. It's something that clearly has been interwoven into the core of this company and into the culture of this company. And it's part of the conversation whether you're at the shop floor or at the boardroom. And I think very much it has to be because of our roots, because of how our company started. So across our company and around our world, our people maintain our performance opposite these core values, and our statistics show it. We measure performance of just about everything, and we measure performance of our core values as well. You can't have a company where most of us at least started out as engineers and not have a tremendous amount of measurement. But outside organizations measure us as well, such as the Hesburgh Award criteria that you've established. And I'm, again, very proud that DuPont is a recipient of the award. And other recognitions, such as being on Corporate Responsibility Magazine's list of the 100 best corporate citizens. But the reality is we're on these lists because it is the way we operate. It is the way our people interact and interchange every day. And that does make us who we are. So living by our core values and focusing on our mission and driving inclusivity with customers and other partners and directing our innovations in places where sustainability matters. These are just some of the global complex challenges that DuPont is all about. But in closing, just let me offer you one piece of advice, and I'm going to take a little bit of from what I heard from the three students earlier this afternoon. You know, when you reflect on what makes you successful as a person or what makes you successful as a company, any of us in our daily lives operate because we operate under a certain comfort factor of who we are and our values. And if you're ever in a place that asks you to compromise those, you have to ask yourself whether that's the right place for you. You know, I came to DuPont 22 years ago, and I can say very clearly that I was never once asked to compromise my values or to compromise who I was. And I think that speaks a lot to the company, and it's why I have stayed and just created a tremendous, working relationship with the people there and with our teams around the world. So when you're out there looking around or wondering that question around, would you ever consider changing jobs because you felt that uncomfortable, you got to look for a company whose values mirror your own. And it is that place where you will feel very comfortable. So thank you again for the Hesburgh Award. On behalf of the employees of the DuPont Company and our entire board of directors, we are deeply, deeply grateful to be honored and very proud for what it stands for. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. She's willing to take a few questions here.
That's fine. Yes.
With their tax liability in the United States and some of the offshore holdings they have, do you consider the tax burdens sort of a responsibility to the countries you do business in? Or is it just a smart business to figure out ways to limit your tax liability?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, but not a very straightforward one, in that the tax laws are so complex, and there are a lot of things that come into bear. So the U.S. has a tax rate that's pretty high, it's 35%. Now, we pay more like 25%. So why? Well, there's an R&D credit, and there's a U.S. manufacturing credit, and there's an accelerated depreciation. There's so much complexity in the tax laws that there is no one right answer. I'm a big proponent for simplifying it, for taking away a lot of those extras and making it very straightforward on what it is. Territorial tax system, make it in the mid-20s somewhere for the U.S., and you're going to hear a lot of screaming around the world because every industry has its own set of exceptions or credits that they get. So I think, unfortunately, we have, over years, created a very complex business tax system. I believe businesses need to pay taxes where they earn them. I'm not sure that a business should pay tax twice, once in the country that it's earned and another one in their parent country. There's a difference of opinion on that with Washington. But, I can't speak to GE and their specific situation, but all I know is every time I go in and try to understand our own, there's so many, what the government calls loopholes, what we call credits, that come into play there that it's really, I'm all for simplifying it and all for making it very straightforward and so that you really can't game the system. Other questions? Yes.
One of the panelists earlier about the importance of having a mentor, something to go to, that ethical questions. Who does the CEO and chairman of one of the world's largest companies go to discuss important ethical?
Yeah. Well, a lot of different people. So for instance, I've got a team of about 7 of us. It's called the Office of the Chief Executive, and we work together. We have a different governance system. I can't make all the decisions alone. I have to have their agreement with me. Now, they understand an organization chart and who's in charge, but the way we've set it up, and it's been set up for about 50 years in the company this way, is that I need to seek their counsel. And so I've got great relationship with these EVPs, my general counsel, my CFO, my head of HR, Maritza Poser-Grace is sitting here. She went to Notre Dame, by the way. She had to come with me. And so, but you know, the interesting thing is some of the tougher ones, it does tend to be my husband. Sometimes even my 20-year-old daughter, who's a junior in college, who came to me with an interesting ethical dilemma about a study one of her professors wanted to have them do and how they would represent themselves on these interviews. But because sometimes they're not complex science questions, they tend to be, sort of, kind of, not at the margin, but they tend to be sort of broader than that. And so you can get a lot of different people's perspectives when the issue's broader. If it's specific, do I do A or B, that's when you just have to kind of close within the company and make that decision there. But it is a job where it takes a while for people to get used to being asked, and it takes a while for them to answer honestly. Because at the end of the day, I'm still their boss, right? So. Yes. Well, uncertainty and a crisis of confidence, I mean, you wake up every day. So maybe the worst thing and the best thing that ever happened to me was I became the CEO right at the beginning of the global financial crisis. If there was ever a point for a rallying cry in the company, that was it. And we made some fundamental decisions. We weren't going to cut research and development. We were going to slow down capital spending. And, we did have to shut down some factories, some plants for a while, lay off some people, and we had to weather through that. I think that created a great sense of teamwork among us, which I think is really helpful. Now we're entering 2011. We had a great 2010. Markets came back. What's going to happen this year in the economy? Well, between where oil's going to go, what's going to happen in Libya, what's happening in Japan, the uncertainty is the biggest issue you have to face. And to find a team that can really deal with ambiguity, because there are very few things in our world that are black and white. Very few. Most of them are a great number of shades of gray. And you have to create that real sense of teamwork because none of us have the answer solely. The collective whole creates a much better path forward than an individual. And so creating that team that works together in order to be able to drive in that direction. Because if you get alignment around the top leadership of a company, there is almost nothing you can't get done. But you have to have that alignment, and that's very important. Yes?
Those decisions, does it make it easier that you have like a 200-year-old company that has like all these precedents behind it, or does it make it more difficult because you have to kind of look up to all that 200 years worth of tradition that's behind every decision you make?
Yes. Yes. It kind of depends on what the issue is, right? So if it's new ground, new territory, like for instance, we were doing a lot of research in nanotechnology, and nanotechnology is of concern because of the size of the nanostructure and what can it do. And so we actually partnered with the Environmental Defense Group. Now, you can imagine a chemical company partnering with the Environmental Defense Group in order to come up with a framework on how we would approach those issues. And, and that was a really, kind of a great way to do it because it took it outside of the realm of science wins and puts it in the realm of science has to be acceptable to the community at large, right, and has to work for people. That was one of those areas that, our history would have said, don't do it that way. But where we are today and how important some of this technology can be to really cracking some tough problems, we knew we had to do it a different way to get the acceptance and to get a real open, view to the new technology. If you look at what Europe is doing with genetic modification, right? It's just they don't understand it, so the answer is no. Well, we think that a different kind of engagement with NGOs and with communities at large can bring a different outcome. So that's where you have the 208 years you kind of have to leave behind you to move forward in a different way. Yes?
What sort of challenge face as a woman leading a company that's in 90 countries where some of your employees are
different. So, and the other thing is that they don't make me go out and drink with them at night, which is good. So I can stay on the good side. I mean, it's because different countries have all these different cultural, don't even go there. But, actually, I think I've never seen it as an issue, and I haven't been to all 90 countries yet, but I had great acceptance in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. Interestingly, in Western Europe and U.S., I deal with less women as business leaders than I do in Asia, Africa, or Latin America. I find a lot more women running small companies, important jobs or the top job in a large company in the developing regions of the world than I do in the developed regions of the world. And so that was a really interesting aha for me as I've been traveling around the world the last, 5 or 6 years. But, at the end of the day, I'm the boss, right? So, I'm a very engaging person. I'm not shy. I'm willing to sit down and talk to them. When I go out, and I do town meetings for everybody. I sit with women's groups. I sit with any group that wants to talk to me and listen. I do a lot of listening in my job. Because at the end of the day, for us to be successful in that country, we have to understand how we have to operate in it consistent with our core values. And that sometimes is that bridge that we have to work on, because sometimes the values just are different, and you have to deal with that.
That's a good joke.
Great. Oh, one more?
About his religious experience. What kind of role does religion have at DuPont and maybe in the business going forward, and how does the religion affect the ethics of an organization, I guess, or vice versa?
So we have people from all different religions, to those with none, to those with, and very strongly held beliefs. And we have immense respect for that because it makes them who they are, right? At the same time, when you enter into a work environment, you have to be respectful of all those around you. So you can't postulate around your view only. You have to work in an environment that's collaborative and accepting. And that's where I translate religion into values, right? So what kind of values does that person have? And I view the values as being the important thing. And I think that translates the most into highest ethical standards and respect for people and operating in a way to keep their fellow coworkers safe. And so that's, I think that people need to translate that into the values to really be effective in the work environment. Because it is about, at the end of the day, it is about common courtesy and respect and listening. And those are all skills that we, learned about way too young and maybe don't practice quite as well as we should sometimes. And so that's the translation I make that I think makes it successful. We don't ask anybody to compromise on their religious beliefs. We absolutely don't. But if they are counter to creating a collaborative environment, we do ask them to leave it at the gate, right? And we've dealt with some pretty tough situations in the southern part of the United States and other places that would just make your blood boil. And but that's the reality sometimes of the world we live in. And remember, we're 208 years old, so we've seen a lot of different things. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Ellen. I think you now understand very well why Charles made an excellent selection of DuPont as our 2011 Hesburgh recipient. Thank you for coming, and appreciate Karen and you, Marissa, coming, and we'll look forward to reading more good news about DuPont in the future. Thanks. Yeah, that's yours. That's yours.